Never enough time in the day, and always work to be accomplished. Episode 9, man, of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. We have quite a bit to talk about today, man. And what a productive week. A lot has been accomplished. The writing is going smoothly, man. I'm reading back this dialogue, and let me tell you, man, you gotta really fine tune it, but once you do, oh man, reading that back, it makes all that time worth it, all that time and energy put into your craft, man. Reading is still getting done. I'm still continuing on with Killing for Culture, which I'll talk a little bit about more in just a little bit. A couple films that I think I might bring up just for some discussion's sake. Some good theatrical experiences this week, man. Some interesting theatrical experiences. Maybe I'll talk about those briefly. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We only are given this 30 minutes, and I certainly do not want to waste it. So let's not waste it. And we're going to go right into talking some more about Killing for Culture. I've made quite a bit more progress on it, and normally I don't do a whole week by week breakdown of what I'm reading, because I'm also reading another book right now about the making of The Godfather that maybe I'll talk about when I actually finish that, because that's about a quarter of the size of this one. But just going through this and some of the films that I didn't really talk about a whole lot last week or hadn't mentioned. Some stuff in here that, like I was saying last time, just some information here that you just can't get anywhere else. There's a really terrific chapter that I just finished up all about the mail order sort of custom-made pseudo snuff and fetish kind of tapes that people were doing at the time. I know, probably the big one being W.A.V.E Productions, who have a bit of a resurgence right now from the very solid mail order murder documentary. And a couple of their films have been released on Blu-ray through Saturn's Core, one of the partner labels of Vinegar Syndrome. And Mail Order Murder as well was their first Blu-ray they released. And I have not seen any of the W.A.V.E films. Watching that documentary, I kind of got the same reaction when I watched the Al Adamson documentary, the Blood and Flesh one, which both I think are very good documentaries. But at the end of it, I realized that I just don't have a whole lot of interest in seeing these films. I know that with that Severin Al Adamson box set, which is coming in at about, I believe, $200 or so, I just couldn't justify that for films that maybe on an educational level would be important to watch, but in terms of any sort of entertainment, I didn't really see much that appealed to me. But Blood and Flesh as well is a very good documentary. But yeah, I mean, some of the W.A.V.E titles I'll check out. I'm kind of trying to pick up all of the Saturn's Core releases. I have probably about half of them right now, and I believe the person who runs Saturn's Core is, I think, one of the directors or someone involved with Duck the Carbine High Massacre, which was an early release from them, which is not a W.A.V.E title. That's just one that came up in the book in terms of, that's a film that I haven't seen, but I guess is a recreation of the Columbine High School Massacre that just happened when the movie came out. And there was a whole big thing when the filmmakers got arrested for bringing guns onto school grounds or something like that. I don't know. I'm picking up that title actually this weekend over Vinegar Syndrome's halfway to Black Friday sale, which reminds me, it's a nice long weekend ahead of us. It's a little cloudy out today, man, but that's all right. Doesn't mean work can't get done. It's been nice and cool lately, nice and breezy. I tell you, man, the other week, earlier this week, man, I was outside having to do some work, and it was pretty rough, man. I tell you, you feel like the floor of a dirty movie theater, just sticky all over, man. You're muggy, but hey, man, the work's got to get done. Someone's got to do it, and if that someone's you, man, then you nut up or shut up. But what I was talking about before with Killing for Culture is, that chapter, like I was saying, is very informative about the W.A.V.E Productions and some of the other productions that were a bit more kind of varied in terms of some were featuring, they talk about like this. Actually, I got it right here. This what is this virtual kidnapper that was put out by this company Factory 2000, who were I think this one is like a POV thing where it's like POV of like a girl being kidnapped or raped or something like that. I'm not actually sure. I mean, I guess virtual kidnapper is in the name, but I'm not sure if it's the POV one with Misty Monday, who I believe is an adult film actor. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, this chapter goes over that, and this was, I think, one of the most informative because the W.A.V.E stuff I know from the documentary, but a lot of the other stuff I wasn't even familiar with. They talk about some of the other companies that were doing more. It's interesting they talk about just kind of the custom ways people could get their ideas onto the screen. Mostly a lot of like fetish stuff, like there was a big thing they talk about with a lot of people wanting like strangulations and asphyxiations type of things, and there was a bunch of those, man. Just like, I mean, to call them films is a bit of a stretch, man. It's sort of like just videos, and I mean, I guess I think the W.A.V.E stuff might be more closer to an actual film narrative, but some of the other companies looks like doing more of just fetishistic kind of stuff, which is interesting. It's such a cool idea that sort of here's a template, or here's what you pay a fee or X amount, whatever, and they would make the film, the video for you. It's just a very interesting idea, and the fact that so many companies were doing that, well, maybe not so many, but this handful that were doing that, it's a really cool idea. One of the things that in the previous chapter, getting off the topic of the mail order stuff, is there's a bit more about it's so far it's been the funniest, like what can be the funniest in a book all about death and murder, is some stories about the premiere of snuff I say Alan Shackleton snuff, but I mean, I guess you could say that is his product. I mean, he's the mastermind behind the distribution. But anyways, they talk about a very funny story that they reference earlier in the novel about the premiere of Snuff and the interesting circumstances around it, how it was in a pretty bad neighborhood and there were not a lot of people there, and they upcharged the tickets to, I think, like $7.50, which I don't, you do the math and the inflation, but so they mentioned that earlier in the book, and then they go back to it later in one of the chapters I just read, and it's pretty interesting. They talk about how there's a whole section about the FBI investigating so-called snuff films and so-called real murders and stuff, and it was all bogus. They had a file on it, but they had nothing to really show for it, and they mentioned a lot of most of the people in attendance of the premiere of Snuff in Indianapolis were either the FBI or cops or other people who were alerted to this quote-unquote snuff film and quickly realized that after it was over that it was complete bogus. And there are some great behind-the-scenes photos of the finale of Snuff in here that I have never seen anywhere. Like I was saying last week, man, a lot of this information and a lot of this stuff you just will not find anywhere else. You have to read about this stuff, and so much of it gets passed through the grapevine of just so much misinformation, and I'm not saying that if it's printed, it's automatically fact. Obviously, that would be a ridiculous thing to say. However, from everything I've read here, a lot of this I have not heard repeated or mentioned. So I am taking this as to heart, I should say. I'm just flipping through here again. They talk about some of the other late 90s shockumentaries and evolutions into different types of tapes being traded, or DVDs, I should say, being traded. Actually, it may still have been tapes at the time. I think it probably was, because DVDs are probably not that as common. But, I mean, they talk about, like, the Banned in America films a little bit, but I mean, they had to have been released on VHS to my knowledge. I've only ever seen them on DVD. So that's why, anyway, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But they mentioned the evolution from that to stuff like, what is it? It was called like Ghetto Fights or something like that. It was like a bunch of like fight videos and stuff of like, what the hell is it called? Yeah, it was called like Ghetto Streets or Ghetto Fights or something like that. And they had bum fights as well, which is probably the most famous out of all of them, to break into kind of I say the mainstream, but then they mentioned how here we go, like Ghetto Fights 2, Terrorist Killers, and Middle East Wackos, and then the Banned in America films. Banned in America put out by Brain Damage, who is the one who put out the Traces of Death films most famously, and I think Brain Damage are still around, man. I think that Brain Damage has put out just indie films now, to my knowledge, because there's also a really terrific interview with the guy who I just closed the book, and I'm let's see if I can find his name, but I'll talk while I try to find it. The guy who did Faces of Gore, and I believe he was the same guy to do the Necrophiles, and I think he did some other kind of here we go. I got it right here. Todd Gersland. I don't know what to say his last name, but I remember I found Faces of Gore on YouTube like a long time ago, man, and I remember getting it mixed up with Traces of Death, and I mean, I guess they're kind of interchangeable, but Faces of Gore is probably a little more in bad taste. There's a lot of joking, a lot of silliness going on in between these horrific images of suicides and aftermaths, and there's a really good interview in there with him about sort of some regrets that he had about the series and about the era of shockumentaries and death on tape, and it's just very fascinating. It's a pretty lengthy interview as well, and kind of made me look at the film in a new light. That's not to say that I have would recommend Faces of Gore. I'm not gonna say my complete opinion has changed on it. I think at the end of it, I really just kind of got exactly kind of what I always saw it as, was just a cash grab, or a cash in at the time of riding on the coattails of a lot of other shockumentaries that were coming out, but this one just happened to have, and also with shockumentaries having a host, like, going back to Faces of Death with Francis B. Gross, and I always found it funny they try to keep, I can't even remember, I've never seen Faces of Death 3 or the other ones, but I think they try to keep a storyline going with Francis B. Gross saying that he either died under surgery or he committed suicide because he had seen so much death. Just a totally ridiculous thing. I guess the actor, I don't think he was related to the director. Like, I think he just didn't want to do it or was unavailable or something like that. So they had this totally ridiculous thing, man. It's so silly. But kind of what I was talking about last week a bit with the comparison between a lot of these shockumentaries and a lot of the mixtapes that people make very quickly and cheaply is that I think that with a lot of the shockumentaries, it's a bit more time consuming to put these things together at a point in time when you couldn't just go online and look up whatever horrific thing you wanted to see. There's a little more I say what's the word I'm looking for, a little more gosh, man, I apologize, guys. My brain's a little fuzzy this morning, so please bear with me. They're a little more, gosh, man, what the hell is that word I'm thinking of? I guess programmed would be it. I'm not exactly sure of it, but they feel a little more put together by somebody instead of just slapped together. I guess, if that makes any sort of sense. Not necessarily just if they have a host or not, but more so in the fact that they feel just more like they had to get all this footage. They couldn't just they couldn't just go online and download it, which a lot of the mixtapes that they have now are, which are just like, stuff like what I was saying before, stuff like the MD Pope films, and which is all just like stuff online, and then that whole thing there with that controversy, which I won't even get into because that's a whole other rabbit hole. Anyways, man, what I'm saying is that I just find this era of distribution and of shockumentary interesting, is all more interesting than now, which I've just have not kept up with at all. I've mentioned before that I don't keep up with any of the mixtapes. There's so many of them out there. Everybody's doing them, and they're just less interesting, I guess, than a lot of this. It's also a different era, too. I mean, you're at an era where you can't, a lot of the stuff is still pretty taboo, and you really can't get anything of it, but now anyone can go online and just look up whatever they want. So they take some of the mystique and some of the allure away of getting a tape, putting it in, and just... Anyways, I know I'm kind of rambling in circles here. I didn't even really, I didn't talk about Goodbye Uncle Tom at all, because that was one that I've actually been wanting to rewatch, which is mentioned a couple times in the book as a sort of pseudo-mondo film from the directors of all the big Mondo films, Jacopetti and the other fella, which I don't remember his name, but I'm a big fan of that film, but I would actually like to rewatch it before I talk about it. And I don't know if I'd mentioned or not that that's coming to 4K either this year or next year, man, from Blue Underground, which is a very interesting title for them to do. I'm actually kind of surprised they are putting it out. I've already read a little bit of backlash about it, which I just find completely ridiculous. I think any sort of backlash to that film is completely reactionary and is completely just whenever you get any sort of controversial film released or shown, it's just then people want to like silence it. It's just ridiculous. I saw a thing where Grindhouse releasing where they mentioned a thing they were having a screening of Cannibal Holocaust somewhere in California because they tried to have it before and that screening got shut down, and I was just like, man, what kind of dystopian future is that, man, just shutting down a screening like that because it's a film you don't like? And I know that people are upset by some of the real life stuff with the animals and all that, but that's a whole other conversation which I have definitely talked about before, at least at some point in the show, so I'm not going to get into it again. But I just find any sort of film censorship, anything to be censored like that, completely ridiculous and completely reprehensible and disgusting. Frankly, I'm a pretty advocate of zero censorship in terms of context. But anyways, that is a whole other conversation that I do not mean to get into. But I'm keeping along very well with this book. I may not talk about it next week just because I still have. I have I have so much other stuff to talk about that to actually keep devoting time to that would be something else entirely. Anyways, I'll talk a little bit about some of the other films that I wanted to mention. Let me get some more coffee right here. So I went to the cinema a couple times this week. I won't be going too in depth into it. Let's see here. So in terms of interesting cinematic experiences on this past Tuesday, I'm not going to talk too much about these films, by the way. This past Tuesday, I went to go see Top Gun Maverick, which was the, let's see here. I don't know who directed this, because Tony Scott directed the first one, who has since passed away. But yeah, very interesting film. It's a good cinematic film, let me tell you. It was a very packed showing. It's a film that the audience was very much enjoying. A lot of the jokes they were responding to, the action scenes were very well done. And I think looking at Tom Cruise in terms of a film's draw is important, because I think when people say movie star, it's not just somebody who is in these big theatrical films. It's all about, are they enough to draw someone in to see the film based on who they are. And I think that Tom Cruise is absolutely one of the last big movie stars. I look at someone like him or like Denzel Washington per se, and if I see them in a film, it's going to enhance my opinion of going to see the film theatrically. And he's an interesting guy, and it's an interesting film. I'm not going to get too in depth on the questionable plot choices and some of the decisions made, but overall, man, it's a very fun, enjoyable film. I had quite a bit of fun watching it, and it's a film that's 2.5 hours and goes by at a pretty brisk pace because of the well-directed action sequences, the choreography, the the jet flying sequences that are very well directed, man. I think that's one thing that I've noticed with the past couple of Tom Cruise films, is that the action sequences, aside from the fact of him being notorious for, or notable I should say, for doing his own stunts and these, or at least most of his own stunts, these big kind of set pieces, sort of like the draw of the film, as well as him is the are the set pieces. It's sort of like, you're going to see these terrific otherworldly, dangerous kind of sequences. Like remember in the last Mission Impossible, there was that whole sequence at the end on the side of the mountain on the avalanche. It goes from the air to the mountain, and it's just a terrific sequence. And this film has plenty of those with a lot of the cameras mounted to the jets. And very kind of dizzying and fast-paced moments. You know what? I'm not gonna get too much into it because I'm kind of bust through some of these really quick before the end of the episode. But I will say it's a recommendation for sure. A very enjoyable theatrical experience, and I think that seeing this on I did not get an opportunity to see this on IMAX because of geographical disadvantages, but I did see this in a quote-unquote large format screen, and I think that is the best way to see it. I can't even imagine somebody watching this on their telephone or on their tablet or anything of the such. So yeah, make a point to go out and see this one. It's definitely one that I enjoyed quite a bit. It's good to kind of get a palate cleanser of a film like this that in terms of any sort of, you know, I'm watching this purely for entertainment, not necessarily for any sort of thought-provoking questions or anything of the such, I should say. I'm not walking out of the theater pondering too much about the character's plight. It's more just about these fun action sequences stringed together with some lighthearted moments in between. And yeah, I like it quite a bit, actually. I would definitely give this one a recommendation. I finished out the Apu Trilogy theatrically with the new 4K restorations that have been going around from Yanis Films of Satyajit Ray's Apu Trilogy of Pather Panachali, Aparajito, and finally the World of Apu. And I think all three have alternate titles, which I do not remember. I think the World of Apu also goes by Apur Sansar. And I'm not going to talk too much about Pather Panchali or about Aparajito because I would need a bit of a refresher on those because I'm kind of just going off my notes right here. All right, thank you for bearing with me on that. Yeah, Apur Sansar or the World of Apu, I think is definitely the strongest out of the trilogy. It's very interesting to see the evolution of. Let me see if I can actually say his name correctly because I don't want to butcher his name, but it is interesting to see the evolution of the filmmaking by Satyajit Ray, we'll just go with that, because Pather Panchali, which is a bit rougher of a film in terms of less narrative in the story, or less of a narrative, more so about the sequences following young Apu and his family and the hardships that he goes through. And it seems like I've noticed with each of the three films how there becomes more and more of a narrative. I think the World of Apu has the most clear narrative of the three. We have Apu as an adult who is on his own now, and he is having some financial troubles, but he gets himself into a situation where he is put into a forced marriage with another character, a teenager. I think she was a teenager. I think I read she was 14 when they made this. I can't remember if that was the character or if that was the actress at the time, because she looked older than that. This actress, Shamila Tagore, and that's really the first half of the film and then where it goes to. But seeing a lot of the camera movements, a lot of specific shots, which is one thing I noticed. There's a lot of times where you see a little bit in Pather Panchali with that, where there are some times where a character will be framed in between two walls or something like that. We'll see like a crack in the wall and you'll see a character there, if that makes sense. I'm not really sure how to explain it in words, but here it seems a bit more deliberate with a lot of it. There's a lot of just terrific looking shots where Apu is walking through this open landscape, or there's a great shot of Aparna, who is his wife, who which is just one of my favorite shots in the entire trilogy, where they're in a carriage together and she lights a candle and gives him this beautiful kind of look. Oh my gosh, man, it's like it makes the hairs on your arms stand. And then the second half, I mean, all three of these films have their darker moments, and this film is very bitter. It goes through the range of emotions, man. And the conclusion of the film, I found, if you watch these films, how am I trying to put this? If you spending these past 3 weeks watching these three films, getting to the conclusion of this one, I thought was so much more powerful than if I spaced these out, or A Species Out More, I should say, or if I'd watched them without having seen them. Like, you don't need to see the other two films to know what's going on here, but I think it will greatly help because at this point you have a connection, you have a real connection to this character. You've seen the struggles that he has gone through and who he has lost, and especially the ending of Aparajito I found so powerful and emotional. I won't talk about that film too much because that is actually a 1956 film and may or may not currently be on my list for the year. So if it doesn't make the list, I'll talk about it. But right now it is on the list, so that's a way that I'll let you know about. But where this goes to at the end, I found so powerful, and I found myself getting misty-eyed in the cinema. I just found it to be a very an ending that kind of brings everything not necessarily full circle, but is more optimistic in terms of a character who has been through so much hardship and loss, and having an opportunity to redeem his soul, sort of like his heart, because he's somebody who is it's kind of tricky to talk about without getting into spoilers, but it's somebody who has been kind of maybe lost in a way, kind of on their own for a lot, and getting an opportunity with any sort of compassion, or I'm sorry, not compassion, any companion kind of taken away from him is very, very moving. Like I was saying, the first half and the second half of this film, I think, are very interesting opposites in a way, where it's interesting to see Apu at the beginning of this film to the end of the film, and even to shit, man, this, from the beginning of Pather Panchali to this, it's so. You know what? I almost kind of wish I had just spent the episode talking about this, because I have a lot to say about this. One, not trying to spoil it, and two, trying to get my thoughts into words. But you know what? I may talk about this next week. I can't guarantee it, but I'm gonna, for the sake of not going in circles and not repeating myself, I'm gonna probably just stop right there. But let me just say, The World of Apu is one of the best films I've seen this year. It is one of the most emotional films I've seen this year, and I just love this trilogy, man. It's something I want to talk definitely more about at some point, so I'm going to cut it off right there. And something I'll briefly talk about, which I really didn't have any intention to, but I just thought was an interesting thing that I wanted to mention. I saw director Charlie Shackleton's experimental film, The Afterlight, which has just, I am not familiar with his previous work. He's done a couple films like Beyond Clueless, and this was it's a little tricky talking about how this film is. It's basically it's a single 35mm print constructing a narrative solely based off of previous footage of actors who have died, and the film ends with the complete list of actors and when they were born and when they died, and it's a very interesting experiment. I don't think I totally loved it as a feature. I do think that it does run out of steam at times and can be a bit repetitive, but I think for fans who are into this, a way of constructing a narrative in terms of recontextualizing footage, I find so interesting and fascinating, of just taking these clips from films. And when I say constructing a narrative, I don't mean a story. I mean in terms of just flowing the film together. So you'll have sequences of various characters walking, or sequences of characters getting into this bar, or exterior shots of these beautiful open landscapes, man. And it's so interesting. And I think what Charlie Shackleton has done is so interesting, and I'm very curious to see his other work. Even though, I don't think The Afterlight totally worked for me, I'm very glad I saw it, and it really, although I'm not really sure about the legality on some of these things, because I recognized a handful of the film clips used, and I don't really know how that works, but in terms of screening it publicly, but I don't know. I'm not gonna question. There was actually a Q&A after with the director, which I unfortunately could not stick around for. I had to go somewhere, so I was not able to perhaps ask a question. But currently it's only theatrically touring. I have no idea if it'll tour again, but I don't know, if the opportunity comes, I just want to mention it because I don't really. It's not a film that probably get mentioned a whole lot. I got. Oh man, I ran right out of time, so I'm gonna end it right here, man. Come back next week for more talk.